Welcome to Fireside Gaming. I'm Billum, and when the PSP came out, I was about 15 years old. I didn't get one right out of the gate, but rather bought one from my brother-in-law about a year after its release. And this is one of the game consoles that I have the fondest memories with. And why wouldn't it be? It was like having a PS2 on the go, or close enough to it. And the PS2 was such a great system, and it still has my favorite library of games to this day. I'm one of those people that still keep my PSP charged and play it regularly. Granted, it's not my original 1000 model, but rather a 3000 model I got for Christmas while in college. My 1000 model has seen better days, but I am looking to fix it up and give it as a gift to my son when he's old enough. I'll probably pass down my old carrying case to him as well. I don't use it as much anymore since I keep backups of all my games on my memory stick, but this old GameStop case used to go everywhere with me. Luckily, I am a fan of cargo shorts and pants, so it was never awkward to keep it on me at all times. And while I did make the jump to the PS Vita when it came out, it didn't have the same appeal to me. It's a great console today thanks to the homebrew scene, but I rarely found myself playing mine after getting it. So much so that I sold it a few months later and I switched back to my PSP. It was strange to be going backwards instead of forwards, but I blame Sony for that. And of course, the PSP has a wonderful homebrew scene as well, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Instead, I am looking back at the 10 PSP games that I spent loads of time on through high school and college. These aren't necessarily my 10 favorite PSP games, though many of them would make that list, but rather these are the games that I had and favored during the roughly 8-year period where my PSP got the most use. But before we get into that, I do have to make a quick honorable mention for PS1 classics. The ability to take PS1 games on the go was downright mind-blowing. I loaded up on so many of my favorite PS1 games to play them all over again while on the go. Grandia, Wild Arms, and Chrono Cross were always on my memory card, and I was actually at E3 when Final Fantasy VII was announced as a PS1 classic, and I downloaded it as soon as it went up. There were even some PS1 games that I played for the first time on my PSP. That includes Resident Evil 2, which I picked up because I started the series with 4 and I wanted to know more about Leon's past. And that got me to play more of the older Resident Evil games, so thanks PS1 Classics for getting me into other series. Now let's get into this list proper, starting with
Ridge Racer.
This was the first PSP game I ever played, thanks to it coming with mine. It was my brother-in-law's, and he bundled it together with the console so that I would have something to play whenever I bought it from him. Because of that, this game was my go-to game for such a long time as it was all I had to play. Well, that and a Cabela's game, I want to say it was Dangerous Hunts, but I can't remember, and a copy of the Spider-Man 2 movie, both of which were lent to me for a short time by him. And while this is a full-on racing game with multiple circuits to complete and cars to collect, it also includes a copy of New Rally X, an arcade racing game from 1981. This pops up on the loading screen and is a great way to kill time while waiting for a race to start. I actually thought it was original for this game. I didn't know it was another game or an older game added to the loading screens. And while that is cool, it is not the meat of Ridge Racer. The gameplay and graphical leap that I experienced in handheld gaming at this time was amazing. It may not look like it through this blown up footage captured from my TV, but scaled down to the size of a PSP screen, Ridge Racer looks dang comparable to a PS2 game. And considering my handheld before this was a GBA, it should come as no surprise that I was blown away by what could be done on the PSP, both in terms of gameplay and visuals. But that doesn't mean that every game I played was a visual powerhouse or something all new to on-the-go gaming, like the next game on this list. Ultimate Ghosts and Goblins was one of those games that I dug out of a cheap $20 bin not too long after getting my PSP, and I understand why. The Ghosts and Goblins series isn't made for everyone, and it offers more than a fair bit of challenge, especially if it isn't a series the player is already familiar with. Luckily for me, I spent loads of time playing Super Ghouls and Ghost back in the day. But that didn't stop me from dying over and over and over again while capturing footage of Ultimate Ghosts and Goblins for this video. And while that can be frustrating, this is one of the more generous games in the series, with plenty of checkpoints and the ability to save progress between levels. And while it's not one I revisit much these days, I do have fond memories of working my way through the game during road trips and bus rides. And the PSP is also where I got my first introduction to some series, like with Darkstalkers was one of those series that I only knew vaguely about before playing this game. I was familiar with its characters, such as Morrigan, Felicia, BB Hood, and Anchorus. I probably mispronounced some of those, and somebody will tell me, but whatever, due to my playing of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, as well as the various others that show up as cards in SNK vs. Capcom Card Fighters Clash. But I hadn't played a single game in the series before getting this on the PSP. And it wasn't even a game I was aware of. My mom got it for me for Christmas without me ever showing any interest in it. And considering the ridiculous amount of time I spent playing as all the different characters while killing time between classes in college, I'd say she did a good job. Heck, this game exposing me to Darkstalkers is what led to me picking up other Capcom collections as well, such as the Fighting Collection on PS4. And that led to me playing other games that I hadn't before, like Red Earth and Cyberbot's Full Metal Madness. So if I never said it before, thanks Mom. And the PSP didn't just expose me to new series, but it also saw me continue journeys I'd started on the PS2. That includes me picking up Funny story, I actually have 2 copies of this game. I bought it on release with the limited funds I had in college, only to then get a copy for review from this small game site I used to write for back in the day. It was a dubious job to say the least, with them sending me games, which they got for free, and me writing reviews for them. And that was it. No pay or anything like that. That's a little more sketchy, but I was a dumb college kid, and it was free games. And I would often take the less stellar games and trade them in for other games or cash, which was always welcome as there were plenty of times food was a little bit limited back then for a poor college kid. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, I played this game through all the way within 24 hours my first time, also I could write up that review. And it quickly became one of my favorites, if not my favorite game in the Kingdom Hearts series. I ended up giving the second copy to a friend who just recently gave it back to me as he doesn't have a PSP anymore. But we would spend loads of time running through the arena together as well as playing on the command boards. I actually have a fond memory of us just absolutely screwing over Captain Hook on the Neverland board and completely bankrupting him while refusing to end the game. I'm actually really looking forward to playing through this game again whenever I get to it in my Kingdom Hearts reviews. KH2 is next on the docket with me having all of the footage I need captured. I just need to actually get that video put together. Funnily enough, the PSP is also where I revisited not just the same series, but even some of the same games for ports. In this case, I am talking about I was a big fan of Final Fantasy Tactics on the PS1, as it was one of my first experiences with the turn-based tactical JRPG genre. But you know what I never did? Beat it on the PS1. Part of that was due to me having to restart the game thanks to WeGriff, as I'm sure many of you have experienced as well. And the other was me losing my save data to a memory card wipe. You can hear that story in full in my Digimon World 3 retrospective. So when I got Final Fantasy Tactics War of the Lions on the PSP, I was more than ready to finally put the game to rest. And even then, it took me forever to do so. If I remember right, I poked away at it for years before finally seeing those end credits in 2012. And let me just say, the new translation and extra cutscenes that were added to the War of the Lions, as well as the additional characters, really makes it the definitive version of Final Fantasy Tactics for me. Square was really killing it with these PSP ports, and it even exposed me to a PS1 game I'd never known of before. Just like with Final Fantasy Tactics War of the Lions, Valkyrie Profile Lenneth is another PS1 game ported and upgraded for the PSP. I am not as familiar with the original version of this game, so I don't know what all was changed, but I do know it was loads of fun to play through. I know I'm jumping around timeline-wise here, but I got this game around the same time as my first car back in high school, which was this old Jeep Grand Cherokee. And that matters because I would spend my downtime in my car playing this game. And not just playing it normally, no, I had one of those cassettes that you could plug into a CD player through an aux cable that would plug into my PSP, allowing me to listen to my PSP games through my Jeep speakers. That's probably not what any of these devices were intended for, but hearing Lenneth call down her Einherjar through those extra beefy speakers was one heck of an experience. I've actually been nostalgic for this feeling lately, which has resulted in me plugging in and playing my PSP while waiting in the car for the wife or son to get done with appointments. It's a lot easier to do now thanks to most cars having aux ports, but it's still so satisfying to hear. Also, Valkyrie Profile Lenneth is a game that I really need to revisit. It dawns on me that I haven't played it since first beating it back in the day, and I really should. I also need to beat Valkyrie Profile 2 as well. I've given it a couple of shots over the years, and I've just never gone the distance. Let me know if that's something you would all be interested in. Sticking with my high school years, there was one game that saw my PSP passed around between several friends as we all played through it together, and it's one I've mentioned on this channel before. This is a Japanese import that I picked up during OhioCon 2008. It's actually the first imported game I've ever owned, and is one that I still play to this day. I actually just finished running through all of the normal campaigns to unlock the Axis campaign. Gundam was one of those series that all of us in high school watched or were at least familiar with, and this game was an easy way to experience the UC timeline from 0079 through Zeta Gundam. You don't need to know Japanese, as the menus are fairly simple and the third-person shooter gameplay is easy to pick up and play. This made it a staple game of my PSP for those last few months of high school before we all graduated. Also, it might be the last time I can remember sharing a save file with friends or family. But that doesn't mean that I stopped sharing experiences with friends just because high school ended. In fact, one of my most played games on the PSP is a multiplayer one, and probably won't come as too much of a surprise. Yep, I have been a fan of Monster Hunter for years now. Granted, the first game in the series didn't really jive with me, even whenever all of my friends in high school loved it. I just couldn't get behind using the analog stick to attack. However, I gave the series a chance again when Monster Hunter Tri came out on the Wii, and I fell in love. That saw me trading in some games to pick up a copy of Freedom Unite and play with friends. And man, did I forget just how hard older Monster Hunter games are. I got carded twice trying to take out the high-rank version of the Troublesome Pair quest while wearing starting G-rank armor. It goes to show that I have really been spoiled by just how easy newer Monster Hunter games are. But don't misunderstand, I still beat that quest. I am not that rusty. Also, while looking through that old PSP carrying case I mentioned earlier, I found my hunting horn notes. They were stuffed underneath the game and memory card holder, which is where I used to stash them for quick access. I was absolutely trash at remembering the note combinations on my horns, so these things were a lifesaver since I was our group's main support. Unfortunately, I started playing this game late into my college years when some of my friends had dropped out or moved back to our hometown. So while I got to play the game plenty with them, it was only on the weekends whenever I would come back to visit. Because of that, I never actually beat G-Rank. The wife and I are currently playing through the Monster Hunter series backwards, and Freedom Unite is on our list, though I think we still need to play Portable Third first. Either way, I will be starting over with a new save file, and I hope to actually put this game to rest this time. We are closing in on the end of this list, and there is one game that while I haven't spent as much time on it as the others, I have beaten it more than any of them all combined. Final Fantasy on the PSP is one of my comfort games. Actually, it's a comfort game with just about any version of it that I play. I first encountered it via Origins on the PS1, and I have played through it loads of times since then. Of course, that meant I had to have the PSP version as well. I'm not out here telling you it's the best Final Fantasy game, or anything like that, but its simple nature is one that I greatly enjoy. I'd go into this more, but I don't want to spoil my upcoming review of the game. Just know that it's been a constant companion on my PSP ever since I first picked it up. And now we close out this list with what I consider to be the definitive PSP game. Not just for my time with the console, but as the standout game of its entire life cycle. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII does everything that was needed to mark it as a classic PSP title, and then some. It is a spin-off of a popular franchise on the PlayStation and PlayStation 2. It's sporting beautiful graphics and pre-rendered cutscenes, the overall production values are out of this world, and it packed hours upon hours of playtime into the palm of my hand. Even considering the fact that I don't care much for certain parts of its story, looking at you, Genesis, there is no denying that Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII is a masterpiece of a PSP game. It stands on its own as a great adventure for both veteran Final Fantasy VII fans and newcomers, all while taking advantage of the best parts of the PSP. Its mission structure is perfect for on-the-go gaming. It features a new Game Plus mode for extra playthroughs, and there's never been a time that I've beaten the game without crying. It is dang impressive what this game accomplishes on a handheld system, and it is right up there with Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep as one of the best PSP games there is. I am glad I got the chance to play through it back in the day, and I am looking forward to doing it all over again whenever I eventually get to covering Final Fantasy VII and its spin-offs on this channel. Experiencing Zack's story again is something that I am very much looking forward to, as this game takes him from just being part of Cloud's background and lore to a fully fleshed out, lovable character. Thank you for joining me on this trip through my history with the PSP. It was really nostalgic for me, and I might have gotten a bit too rambly at times, but I do appreciate you all sticking through it. By all means, share with me your fond memories you have with the PSP, as well as any other comments you might have. And until next time, take it easy.